you lost somebody you love, and if they're a bit on the younger side, you kind of just tell yourself that I'd rather live fiercely so they can live through me.
We're out here on the streets to ask people how they regulate their emotions, both the highest of the highs and the lowest of the lows. And at the end, I'll reflect this is what the latest research says and provide some positive psychology strategies to help you regulate your negative emotions and extend the positive ones. When you hear the term emotional regulation, what comes to mind? What does that mean to you?
It means that you're in a situation where you can control how you respond to things.
You're not acting on impulse, like assessing what you really feel.
Not let things outside of my control will impact how I'm feeling.
Just for example, if you're feeling frustrated, what would you do to reduce that frustration and normalize your emotions? Yeah, from extreme to like a normal level.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how well do you feel like you regulate your emotions on a day-to-day basis?
I would say a 7.
And is that something that's always been that way, or is it something you've had to work on?
I think I had to work on it. I used to get a bit anxious and stuff as well.
It's always a work in progress, I'd say. When I was younger, I definitely didn't have a better way of managing my emotions, I would say. I'd probably say 6 up until I was in my 30s, and now I'd say maybe 7.
Wow.
I have more of a self-awareness when I know I'm feeling a certain kind of way.
I think I'm pretty good at it. I'd probably put myself at like an 8 or a 9. I don't usually let things bother me too much. So.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. What about you?
Definitely something I'm working on.
Yeah.
But I've always been working on it. Like, I think everyone has different backgrounds and different ways their brain works. I wouldn't say I'm crazy or anything. Not like, I don't like lose it over everything, but I'm just, a very emotional person, that's for sure.
Interesting.
Probably an 8 or a 7.
Awesome. And has it always been that way, or something that you've had to work on?
I think I'm in a less pressured situation than I would have been probably maybe earlier in my life, or with less external factors which cause me stress.
What is that current situation that you mentioned?
Well, my children have grown up. I own my own property. I don't have many financial pressures. And I'm not overworked.
I wasn't good at it as a kid at all. I grew up with quite, like, my dad in particular, shocking and emotional regulation. So I think for me, learning to not behave that way was a key part of growing up.
I get it from my dad as well, but in the same way where he was able to do the opposite of his dad, I find it's harder for me to do the opposite of mine. But we're definitely learning. We're lucky enough we've been together since we were 15, so that's that's been huge for me in helping me learn by watching, what he does in situations versus what my dad would have done. And
are there any other sort of unlocks that really helped you, or that, say, if you went back to your younger self, advice that you would give?
People you're with, friends. Would you say that, Tess?
You don't have to be friends with everyone. If people are toxic, you don't need them in your life.
I think I've managed to help my anger a lot. My patience has increased so much, but I work in the healthcare industry. I think that helped me to sort of accept and transform myself, meeting other people and learning from them.
A lot of Asians, maybe sometimes they're not taught to actually express.
There are some Asian countries where if you're doing therapy, there's a stigma that something's wrong with you. Like it's a negative stigma. But in Australia, just like in the US, if you're doing therapy, it's like, hey, you need it, go get it.
Can you think of a time where you had maybe an intense negative emotion, and what was happening, and what were the things that helped you get through that?
I think when I was working at a place where I didn't feel valued and things weren't working and I didn't feel that I had the ability to construct a way out of that situation.
And what were the things you tried to do to try and regulate yourself when that was occurring? Because imagine that would have been quite a long journey of, being in an environment like that.
Bad things in the short term, overconsumption of alcohol, short-term releases like playing computer games, and procrastinating, and they were all negative things.
And with the wisdom that you have now, what advice would you give to your sort of self earlier in that moment to kind of do anything differently to have managed that better?
I would advise myself to confront the issues sooner rather than let them escalate and think that they were actually going to get better, or they were actually too difficult to surmount.
So recently I was just doing my in-charge rotation in my ward, so I was in charge of my whole ward. That was quite stressful for me, so I had to leave that ward for 5 minutes, went for a quick break, had a cup of tea, sort of listened to some good music. That sort of helped me to come back to my normal, relieve that frustration away. And
the big transition of moving here and having to let go of everything, what I used to be back home and starting a life here. So how I process that, I don't know. I usually just, I talk to my husband and I take lots of walks.
Yeah, awesome.
The dogs.
Yeah.
Oh, for me, it was definitely when I lost my brother 2 years ago, my younger brother.
Sorry to hear that.
I mean, during that time it was the pandemic, so like you don't get to hang out with a lot of people, but just knowing that they're there through communicating with them and running definitely helped, or exercising too.
Yeah, awesome.
And also, if you lost somebody you love, and if they're a bit on the younger side, you kind of just tell yourself that I'd rather live fiercely so they can live through me, even though they're no longer here.
Beautiful. And flipping to the sports side, to see you both down here for the grand final.
That's right.
And there might be a lot of emotional regulation that's needed on the positive or the negative side. Can you think of a time where you might have had a really intense negative emotion, supporting the Swannies, whether it be a grand final loss, and what were the things you did to kind of regulate yourself in those moments?
Yeah, it's pretty tough in those ones. 22 grand final was really hard. That was, I still don't like thinking about it. There's a line between like letting it, regulating your emotions and not just like kind of ignoring what's happened, So I still think there's merit to almost like grieving the loss of your side after such a long season. It's in sport in particular, like it takes up half a year. For us as well, getting to the games takes us about an hour and a half each way. So it's like it's a big effort, and once it's done, it's done. Hey, after that, it's like there's not much more you can do. So you just got to kind of move on, which I can say, but I won't if we lose. I'll take a few days. So.
In terms of you being, fanatics and supporters and riding the highs and lows of your sport teams, are there any learnings of how you've regulated your emotions in that environment with the sort of your daily life?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I think it's a quick lesson to move on quick from games. Like losses can be so instant, or draws, and it's like you got to take that same mentality towards a lot of things where it's like it's happened. Let's reflect and feel how we feel, and then after that, it's like, all right, what's next? How can we improve? Kind of the key to the success, I think, is how quickly they can reflect on what they've done wrong and improve it. And I think that goes to everyday life as well. Like uni, work, those sorts of things. If stuff happens, you just got to learn from it and move on. There's not much else you can do about it. So.
Can you think of a time recently where you've had an intense positive emotion, and can you describe what was happening and why that occurred?
Well, my parents were here a couple of months ago.
Awesome.
So I was like very happy when they were here, just showing them around and stuff. Whenever I get happy, I just like go with the flow, whatever I feel. Sometimes it's just I end up spending so much if I'm happy.
Yeah. I'm pretty happy now because I haven't seen her in I don't know. More than 10 years? Probably more than that.
After COVID and 2 years or 3 years of not travelling, the ability to actually plan and actually have an overseas trip, which was 5 years overdue in the end, was an intense positive emotion.
Think about sort of intense positive emotions on the other side that you've had supporting Stones. What's occurring when you feel those things, and what does that sort of mean to you?
Oh, definitely adrenaline. We've had a couple of great games in the last few years.
That's pretty much why you ride the lows, I think, is because you know that there are better times to be had, and like ultimately what we want tomorrow is what we feel bad for when you're going through it. And then it's like it's easy for us to comment on. Our team's been super successful for like 20 plus years now. I don't know how you'd go if you interviewed like a North Melbourne supporter. That's tough, eh?
Oh, I just ran the Sydney Marathon, so
awesome.
That was definitely a positive thing. I trained several months for it. I wasn't really the fittest person, so I really made an effort to be prepared for that. But it was definitely a good experience.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how long did that kind of positive emotion last for after you finished the run?
It's still going on. I'm like proud of myself. I still look at the medal and I'm like, yeah, I did that.
That's awesome.
By reviewing where I've been and sort of like the social media and phones say, this was you, this is photos of where you were a year ago, you go, yes, and that was really fabulous. So reconnecting and revisiting those things even momentarily.
In terms of trying to continue to ride that high after you feel those positive emotions, are there any things that you do to try and extend it or keep those going? Yeah,
I mean, I often watch replays, or I'll reflect on the week in different ways, watching post-match conferences, and I take like probably a couple of days and enjoy it. I think once game's done for you, you're like, all right, what's next?
Emotional regulation is a key capability within emotional intelligence and involves monitoring and adjusting our emotional reactions to achieve a goal. In everyday life, the most common goal is decreasing negative emotions, such as sadness or anger, but we can and do regulate positive emotions with the goal of increasing them as well. Emotional regulation ability is a significant predictor of the quality of our relationships and life satisfaction. People who regulate their emotions effectively use a range of strategies depending on the context. The process model of emotion highlights how these strategies can either be preemptive or responsive. Preemptive strategies are used prior to an emotional event and include situation selection, such as avoiding interactions with a mean coworker, situation modification, such as personalizing your work from home space with plants to make it more calming, shifting your attention, for example, focusing on a scenic view to detract from a heated work conversation, cognitive reappraisal, for example, seeing a conflict with a family member as an opportunity to practice better communication, and health, diet, exercise, and good sleep, which builds our patience. On the other side, as the emotion takes over, responsive strategies can be used in the moment. Examples include getting out of the head and into the body, such as going for a run or doing some deep breathing, getting support from others, such as talking things through with a friend or a therapist, reflection and problem solving, such as through journaling on the drivers of the issue and how you can fix it, tuning into and labeling your emotions to better understand and tame them. And on the positive side, savouring, deliberately taking in the good of a positive experience to extend its effects. Now let's compare this with the street perspectives. People spoke about preemptive strategies in terms of avoiding certain people or distracting through other activities. On the responsive side, people seemed well versed on the importance of turning to others for support, getting into the body, and doing self-reflection. One person spoke about sitting with the lows and accepting them as part of the process when following a sports team, yet not many mentioned this strategy of tuning into negative emotions as a strategy for general life. And on the positive side, people seem to savour by reflecting on the experience with photos or physical artifacts like medals, or by sharing it with their mates. Yet not many seem familiar about the technical term and approach to what they were doing. So to bridge this gap, I'll explain two positive psychology strategies, emotional granularity and savouring, to help better manage negative emotions and boost the positive ones. Emotional granularity is the ability to put your emotions into words with a high degree of specificity. Research shows that cultivating this skill can help us better process our emotions and is associated with greater resilience and well-being. In a study involving participants with arachnophobia, 3 groups were shown an image of a spider. The first group was taught cognitive reappraisal and to describe the spider in non-threatening terms, such as cute and fluffy. The second group was taught attentional distraction, to focus on something other than the spider. And the third group was told to describe the spider and their feelings with greater granularity. This disgusting spider makes me anxious. Interestingly, the third approach was the most effective in reducing anxiety. To improve our emotional vocabulary, we can leverage tools like the feelings wheel. Yet it's important to note that this may not work for everyone, as approximately 10% of the population has alexithymia, a condition characterized by difficulty in describing emotions. This is where having a broad array of strategies is important. Yet for most of us, the toxic positivity trap of today's world may lead us to overlook tuning into negative emotions and labeling them as an effective way to regulate them. And if we continue to run away from them, often the fear of engaging can make them appear bigger than they really are. Now on the flip side, we can also look to upregulate positive emotion through savouring. Research shows developing the ability to savour predicts higher levels of life satisfaction and happiness. Savouring involves identifying a positive experience and really allowing yourself to take it in. Now this is different to gratitude, where a brief moment of gratitude isn't enough for the brain to soak it all up and to get the full benefits. So to do this, you really need to sit with it for at least 10 to 30 seconds. So the next time you put up an Instagram post of your holiday, rather than just hitting share, take an extra 10 seconds to really savour the positive experience to extend all those good vibes.